Most people think wars end with cheering. They don't. They end with paperwork, and sometimes with a clock. Because in May 1945, the end of World War II is not a feeling. It is a typed order with a single time that stops millions of people from moving. But here's the part that should bother you. The final German signing in Berlin happens in a Soviet-controlled city, yet an American army camera is inside that room. Not outside. Not later. Inside. So the real question isn't, who signed? The real question is, how did an American lens end up in Soviet-held Berlin at the moment Germany is ordered to go silent? In this video, you're not getting myths. You're getting the chain, the timestamp, the room, the second surrender, and the official captions that prove who was there. Because the war does not end with cheering. It ends at 23:1. A single typed clause orders German forces to stop. Not when crowds feel ready. Not when flags rise. At 1 minute past 11, Central European Time, on 8 May 1945. The line is blunt on purpose. It is written for scattered commanders who still have tanks, rifles, radios, and fear. It is written to shut down motion. That is the first truth. The end of a war can be scheduled. The second truth is harder. The end can be staged. Inside a lit room in Berlin-Karlshorst, a pen moves across paper. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, 62, sits stiff at the table as Germany's top military signer. His uniform looks sharp, but his face looks drained. His posture tries to hold on to dignity that the moment has already stripped away. Around him, seats are filled with victors who control the room. The room controls the story. An American camera is there to record it. That detail feels wrong at first. Berlin is not an American battlefield. Berlin falls under Soviet assault, and the city's surrender is reported as 2 May 1945. By the time Keitel signs in Berlin, the streets outside are already under Soviet control. So the presence of a U.S. Army Signal Corps photographer is not a footnote. It is the question that pulls the entire event open. How does an American lens end up inside Soviet-held Berlin at the moment Germany is ordered to go silent? Step outside the room, and the answer starts to form in the rubble. Berlin in May 1945 is not a victory postcard. It is a broken mouth trying to breathe. Brick dust coats every surface. A single credited photographer appears across key surrender moments and Allied headquarters context. That does not mean one man controlled history. It means history was being captured as a process, with continuity, with receipts. This is where empathy matters, because these are not movie sets. These are rooms full of people who understand that millions will live or die based on what gets signed and how orders move across radios. Keitel is not a symbol in that room. He is a man who knows he is sealing the end of the state he served. He is also a man who will later face judgment. He will be tried at Nuremberg and sentenced to death. The surrender pen is not forgiveness, it is surrender. Jodl, the man who signs at Reims, will also be tried and sentenced to death. A signature can end a war's motion, but it cannot erase what has been done. Now the camera turns back to Berlin outside, because the surrender room is only half the truth. Berlin's ruins are the other half. The delegation moves through the city, and the lens catches what speeches rarely mention. The official ending is clean. The city is not. Wide shots show streets torn apart. Close shots show uniformed faces and hard eyes. Street-level views show damage that does not fit inside the word peace. Armed control points sit in places that used to hold cafes and shops. The calm voice of an official caption hides a violent environment. Real places ground the viewer when memory tries to float away. The Reichstag stands scarred and guarded. It is not yet a symbol for tourists. It is a fresh wound of stone. Alexanderplatz shows the blunt force of collapse. Open gaps where buildings used to stand. The Brandenburg Gate is still standing, but it stands surrounded by rubble, not celebration. These places do not feel historic in that moment. They feel exhausted. This contrast reveals the core injustice of the neat ending story. Everyone learns the war ended with celebrations. The record shows a timed order and a city still crushed under rubble when the order arrives. The ending is announced while people still live inside the damage. That is why wars end twice when power is split. The system failure is simple. The war ends on paper before it ends in people's heads. Reims is built to stop shooting. Berlin is built to settle ownership of the ending. The operational clause is designed to control scattered armies, not emotions. A clause cannot rebuild a home. A clause cannot bring back a body. A clause can only force an end to action. The photographs do something different. They create closure before reality catches up. A staged room, a signature, a careful seating plan, a controlled frame. That frame becomes the story people repeat. It becomes the clean ending that fits in a school lesson. It becomes the image that makes a massive event feel simple. This is why the myth of the neutral camera is dangerous. The lens records truth, but it also leaves room for myths because it can never show everything. It shows a room, not a continent. It shows a signature, not a grief list. It shows authority, not consequences. Captions can tell you what the frame includes, but the frame always leaves something out. So, the only safe rule is the one that protects credibility. Only claim what can be shown through named documents, timed clauses, and official captions that can be traced. That rule does not kill storytelling. It strengthens it. It turns suspense into honest suspense, because the viewer understands what is known and what is still being proven. Now the reveal lands without mystery tricks. This story is not about a single man with a pen. It is about how history becomes official. History becomes official through a chain of evidence. A document with a timestamp. A surrender clause that orders operations to stop at 23:1. A photograph whose caption identifies the event and setting. An archive ID that allows the image to be tracked. A credit line that names the photographer and connects multiple moments in the same surrender process. A separate context photo showing Allied officials moving through ruined Berlin, proving the end was signed while the city still looked like a wound. That chain is the proof. Stop watching the man, watch the evidence around him. Keitel is mid-signature. The caption identifies Soviet headquarters in Berlin. The record carries an official identifier. The surrender text carries the operational end time at 23:1. The Berlin context images show ruins, control points, and the hard reality outside the room. Those pieces fit together into one truth that does not bend. The war ends on paper, while Berlin remains broken. That pattern still controls modern life. Modern headlines love one signature and one photo. A ceasefire is announced, a treaty is signed, a camera flashes. The moment feels real because there is a stage and a table. Yet, life does not change overnight. Damage remains visible, fear remains present. The paper declares an ending while the ground still tells a different story. That does not make documents meaningless. It shows what documents are for. Documents force order on chaos. They tell armies to stop. They tell commanders the argument is over. They give a legal base for arrests, trials, borders, and rebuilding. They do not heal people. They do not restore streets. They do not erase the cost. When someone says history is just opinions, the record answers with hard anchors. 241 at Reims, 23:1 as the operational stop, Berlin as the ratification stage tied to Soviet headquarters. Captions and identifiers that allow later generations to check what happened, where, and under whose authority. Even the dates people celebrate carry the mark of clocks and power. In Western Europe and the United States, victory in Europe is marked on May 8. In Russia and some former Soviet states, Victory Day is marked on May 9 because the ceasefire time crosses into the next day in Moscow. One end, different clocks, different memories. And the camera sits quietly at the center of it, recording without applause. So the final image is not a parade, it is a room. It is a table. It is a pen. It is a caption that names the setting. It is rubble outside a doorway that does not care what officials sign. Berlin's end is not one dramatic moment. It is a chain, a signing, a ratification, and an order with a timestamp. The archives do not let that chain drift into myth. They keep the ending precise. They keep it accountable. They keep it human by forcing the story to stay attached to real places and real names. And once that pattern is seen, it is hard to unsee it. The next time a headline offers a clean ending, the mind can ask a sharper question. Where is the paper? What time does it order? Who controls the room? What does the ground look like outside the frame?